When you're looking at this A&M defense and you're looking at the linebacker position, you get a lot of familiarity. You get a third-year starter and a second-year team captain. And you get an outside linebacker who did a hell of a lot in his first year with a major injury in Scooby Williams. It's going to be a lot of fun to look at this group, and I think there's some really exciting pieces waiting in the wings behind the guys at the top. Because you obviously have a Damian Sanford who's played a lot of football before, but behind him, there's a little bit of uncertainty, but I would call it exciting uncertainty because I'm really, really high on kind of the high school pedigree of some of the next guys up in that room. So we're going to cover that all today in the linebacker position group breakdown. As you guys know, we're doing this series leading into the season. We'll go through every position group, and I'm not going to do these alone. I have Aggies Today. Once again, Jaxson Callaway is joining us again for this linebacker preview. I have several other guests lined up over the coming weeks to help break down this A&M team and become better acquainted with the individual aspects of the thing. So guys, thanks for being here. Like and subscribe. Of course, this video, as all my videos now, are presented by RHOBACK. Use code Drewtamu for 20% off your first order. Let's get right into this thing. All right, guys. I told y'all we got Jaxson back for the linebacker preview. He's going to help us break down the duo of linebackers we have returning. And last time he was on, we got the AT story. We got the story of how he got to where he is now with On3. So now I'm going to ask you, AT, just locking in on this football team going into 2025. Before we get specifically on the linebackers, I want to get your general feel for the team. We talked about the receivers, some really exciting stuff there. But just overall, Elko's year two, how are you feeling about the team? Because to me right now, I don't know about you, but the Kool-Aid might be as sweet as it's been in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's kind of problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when you look at the roster, I think it's a much better roster than it was last year. I think it adds a lot of what you didn't have last year. I love the offense. The defense is kind of where my worries lie, and obviously we'll talk about that in this episode. But I'm curious just to see, you turn 3 defensive linemen in the first 3 rounds of the draft. You lose a guy in BJ Mays that I thought was as impactful in the back end as anybody. I think he was really good. You lose some depth pieces there, but your secondary also last year, I think we had like 4 different schools out of 5 players back there or something crazy like that. And I think bringing all those guys back for another year, that's very intriguing to me. So I'm very excited about it, but I have some worries. But I think overall it's a better team. Will the record show that? I hope so. But again, injuries happen. We learned that the hard way last year.
Yeah, the thing I've been saying about this team is we could see a much better on-field product this year, but not a much bigger scheduled, record difference to show for it because of the pitfalls we have on the road this year. Because obviously the schedule just flips the way it's structured right now, and you get your tough ones on the road. That's well documented. Everyone knows the schedule. Those are going to be tough to get over. But when you're talking about the defense, I'm glad you touched on it. It's going to contrast quite a bit with the last position group we just talked about, receivers, new look group, bringing in guys in. When you're looking at this back 7, outside of BJ Mays that you just mentioned, you're right. He was a godsend in the second half of the season. We hope Tyreek Chappelle can be healthy and be himself and coming back in this thing and fill that role nicely. But when you look at this overall back 7, it's a lot of upperclassmen. It's a lot of guys that have been at A&M for at least a year. And it's not that piecemeal portal or young guy group that you had last year where it's a bunch of guys coming from across the country together. They know each other. Now they know Elko and his expectations in his system. So you get that benefit. But of course, guys just have to be better. The linebacker duo, again, sharply contrasting with what we just talked about in the receivers. You get your same 2 guys back that were your 2 at the top the entire season. It's Taurean York. It's Scooby Williams. And they're going to have the benefit, just like the rest of this A&M back 7, of continuity and familiarity. So last year, I would say, relative to the defense as a whole and how we felt just, disappointed with it, there were some stars there. Those 3 NFL guys, you didn't feel like you got the most out of it. I would say the linebacker group was at the lower end of like kind of the complaint list that you had when you're looking at this team. I did think it started slow though. I think there were some adjustments early in that year to the new look with Scooby transferring out of that or transitioning out of that Edger and Cooper era. So maybe talk about that arc we saw in the linebacker room last year, kind of how it started and how it finished and what you liked and maybe what you didn't like.
Yeah, I was I wouldn't say I was low on Scooby coming into the year, but him coming from Florida, the reviews we had heard from Florida about this guy, and when you looked at the film, it wasn't, it was nothing close to what we saw at A&M, but it was worrisome. And so I was curious on how that would pair with Taurean York, who, like you mentioned, was with Ed Cooper before. Um, and I really like the pairing. I think Taurean York last year, I think he did start slow. And I think part of it was, not having that type of linebacker next to him, but also just the comfort level with a new system and new guys all around you, and having to command all these different players that you have only known for a few months. And so I'm very intrigued how Taurean York does this year. And then I think obviously Scooby started a little slow. I think he missed the most part of that Notre Dame game because of that injury that we found out was much more severe than we all thought. But I'm expecting them to take a jump this year.
Yeah, I mean, Taurean, it's year 3 now, man. He's a 3-year starter in this conference, not even a senior. That's rare in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously going to benefit this team because you look at what Taurean, we'll zoom in on him first, what Taurean does for a football team. I mean, he's a good tackler. He's a good physical player, but obviously has his limitations with the athleticism. He's not a ground cover as a linebacker. But what he is your quarterback of that front seven. He sees plays as they happen. He's the guy that knows the opponent's playbooks. He's a great communicator. He's a great leader of this team as a second-year captain, 2 years back-to-back at SEC Media Days, an underclassman at SEC Media Days, which can be rare, especially from, a non-quarterback. Leader of this team, really. He's the leader of the A&M team. He's going to wear that badge proudly. He's going to represent A&M really, really well. But let's talk about what exactly Taurean brings to a defense, because obviously I think he is a good tackler, and he's usually on time with where he's supposed to be. Just has to be. The room for error is smaller with a guy like him. But talk about what Taurean brings to a team and how he can help this defense out in a year two.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've always kind of struggled with Taurean is that he is as smart a football player as you'll ever find. He's as good a leader as you'll ever find. And while he may not be the most talented of guys, he may not be the quickest, he may not be the most athletic, he is always in the right spot at the right time. And you always need that in a linebacker. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for. I think his impact goes so much more than just that, but I think that that's something that stands out to me because, when you have somebody like that, and I think you saw it a lot in that LSU game, is that when the pressure is on and an offense is fighting to find a flaw in your defense, Taurean York doesn't allow that. And playing alongside somebody like Scooby Williams, that adds an entirely different dimension of that because you're playing alongside one of the best linebackers in the conference. And so if you are just able at Taurean York to keep everybody on the same page as a leader defensively and continue to fill these gaps that you're supposed to fill and continue to be in the right place, that completely changes the dynamic of that defense and the impact it has on the offense. And I think that value can't be overestimated with him.
Yeah, and you touched on this earlier. I mean, Taurean playing next to Cooper, and I think Cooper had his best year playing next to Taurean York because Taurean took that kind of mental aspect out of the game out of Edgerrin Cooper's hands. He was the one. He was calling plays as a freshman, and that's a huge benefit to get from any linebacker, from a freshman specifically. And I think Cooper was a guy that just, covered where Taurean didn't. And that was going sideline to sideline, chasing plays down. Taurean, an elite athlete, now showing it at the next level. And you bring Scooby in to replace Edgerrin Cooper. And I think what you said about Taurean and being on time and attacking the right gap at the right tempo, at the right place, that's all there for Taurean. And if you look at Scooby's time at Florida, well, he had the athleticism. I think he was maybe an edge rusher in high school. He had great athleticism, but he wasn't on time. He wasn't making the great decisions at linebacker. But coming in and playing next to York, it took some time, and it took getting over that early injury to, really get into the flow of things. But I think we really started to see that pan out later in the season with Scooby. He had his best games late. But tell me what you expect from Scooby, now healthy, in a year two, extremely familiar with Taurean York and this Mike Elko defense that he'll be in once again. What do you see from Scooby? What's the next level for Scooby Williams?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see the physical growth there because I think that was a focus of his. But I think even more intriguing than that is that, I think he even spoke about it in a press conference the other day, but this offseason, he's taken a lot of pride in trying to also join Taurean as a leader. And I think that Taurean has done a lot to help him out with just game IQ. And I think exactly what the quote was. I think he said that Taurean was the brains and that he's the brute. He's like, now I have some brains too. And I think that was a big focus because, last year, Taurean York was really the only guy commanding a defense that was full of new talent, unfamiliar faces, and it was a lot harder to kind of control. Now you bring back a lot of people who have been playing with Taurean York, but Scooby can now help out in kind of pushing everybody in the right direction and helping influence everybody in the right way. And I think when you look at that defense, and you can probably even say this last year too, I think Scooby Williams will probably have the biggest impact on that defense in terms of a production standpoint. I think last year you got a lot of production from a number of guys. I think Will Lee was up there. I think he was a lockdown corner. But Scooby Williams, he was one of the best defensive players in the conference last year, I'll say. And he was doing that on a major injury. So the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting to see what this duo can do. And we'll talk about their outlook and upside in a second. And it really just a big feather in the cap of Taurean, because I think we saw just what he can do to the guys around him. Like you look at the LSU game, he's communicating back to his safeties saying, this play is happening here, get out here. He's not even just with the front seven. He's communicating across the entire defense because he sees things. He understands what offenses are trying to do to his defense. And he communicates really, really well. And everyone benefits from that. And I'm really hoping that this young linebacker core behind these two guys at the top will also greatly benefit from being around Taurean and now Scooby, who's, as you said, becoming more of a leader in his own right. I'm really curious to see what else you get from this linebacker room, because I'm really excited about guys like Tristan Jernigan, Jordan Lockhart, Noah Mikael, Kelvin Riggins even. There's a lot of guys out there that I think are the next iteration of linebacker at A&M in years to come, and I can't wait until it's their time. But this season, you lose Solomon DeShields, and he was good for about 160 snaps last year. That is an area the team will have to fill. I mean, first of all, what do you expect for Sanford in a year or two? Because I think the athleticism part and maybe just being a ground cover as a linebacker was there, but the tackling, it came and went for Sanford. What do you think the next level is there, and who do you see emerging behind him? Because you might have a strong competition for the back end of that linebacker rotation.
Yeah, Sanford's made a big jump since last year, I think, and I think part of that is also due to the physical changes he's made. But I also think with him, a lot of it was just the comfortability. I think that it was the physical. I don't know how to exactly explain it, but I think physically he was a little what's the word? It just felt like his body wasn't all moving as one. It felt like he was controlling so many different things at once, and that may be something with the way the physical progress was last offseason, or that could be an injury or the discomfort, but that is gone from everyone I've spoken to.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I think can make a big jump. He's a very talented kid. He's a smart player. We've seen sparks. And he's an exciting guy. We've seen quite a few hit sticks from him as well, which is always exciting to see. But I think behind him is very intriguing as well. I think Tristan Jernigan was a guy that was very highly touted coming out of high school. That was someone who Nick Saban, before his retirement, went full out on, and he stuck to his commitment to Texas A&M. That's a guy that I think down the line, I don't know if it'll be this year, I don't know if it'll be next year, but he's always been a guy that has all the tools you can imagine. He will not be held back from his athleticism, his speed, his IQ, his decision. Like, none of that will hold him back. It's just a matter of putting that all together and making sure it's in an SEC ready body. And so I think you can see him this year. I'm very curious on a few different guys. I think Lockhart showed some flashes in the spring game. And then obviously Noah Mikael. That's a guy that's very intriguing. I think he'll play this year. But I think next year is probably a better timetable for him. But he's going to be a guy that plays a lot.
Yeah, I'm kind of under the opinion right now, because you look at this linebacker room and, Sanford, not a young guy anymore, man. He's a junior. He's in his junior year of college. I think it's going to be a redshirt sophomore year for him. So he's had those years of weight room compounding. Like you said, that physical stuff should be rounding the corner right now. And I would think that whether there's an injury, whether there was just some, maybe just being kind of like a newborn giraffe growing into his body, whatever you want to call it. I think part of that might just be the game moving fast for a young guy, because you see that all the time in this level of sport. But I'm really thinking that this team would benefit from really kind of force feeding some of these young guys, specifically early in the year. I would want to see a little bit of a deeper rotation, specifically versus UTSA and Utah State, because no one likes injuries. No one wants to talk about them, but you have to acknowledge the fact that as opposed to other position groups on this team, for instance, I think DB, you have some depth that you're happy about. The upside there is going to determine a lot of this team, but I think there are some guys that can play there. O-line, you're obviously 7 deep. You're deep at, running back, but an area like maybe defensive tackle or receiver, it's an area where you really don't want to see a top dog go down. You obviously don't want to see anybody go down, but there's a huge experience drop off if you lose a York, and that would be devastating. Or you lose a Scooby, that would be painful because, yeah, Sanford can go in there and play, but beyond that, you have this huge drop off. So I think there's some urgency early in this year to get some of those guys up to speed, and that goes for those other position groups I was just talking about. But having said that, with these two at the top, I can't help but get this feeling that this linebacker room is a little bit slept on this year. I think there's like the Whit Weeks or the Anthony Hills that are getting all the attention, rightfully so, in this conference. But I think as a duo and the way two guys complement each other, I mean, where do you think this linebacker group can end up in the hierarchy of the SEC this year? I think there could be at least an all SEC second team guy in this group this year.
Yeah, I think both those guys can be in those conversations. I think, they're two great players, but I think one thing about it, and it's very similar to what Taurean had with Ed Gearin, is that they just pair so well together. And I think that the value that they both have, I think that Scooby is probably a more gifted player and probably a more productive guy defensively. But Taurean York knows his strengths, and he knows that he can share that and positively impact the team. And I think that the way they've gone about this offseason and Taurean kind of helping Scooby see it all better, let it process it better, knowing what to do as a leader, the value of both of them together has skyrocketed. I think this is, you could argue where in the SEC it stands. Like you were saying, I think that Texas group is pretty good. Georgia always has a really good unit out there. I think Bama's up there as well, but I think A&M, they have as good a linebacker unit as anybody in the conference this year. I won't say the country because I haven't done that much research, but in conference, I think that they're up there.
Yeah, I too have that SEC tunnel vision. We just got so much football to watch down here. But yeah, man, it could be a really good combo. Now, this isn't a D-line video, but I think a big part of them being what they can be this year will be getting that help in that run stop rigidity by this defensive line that will be featuring some newer faces, not necessarily new to the game, but new in the starting lineup for A&M. And I really want to see some of these interior guys hold their own, like Albert Regis take even another step into his development now, 2 years maturing into his body transformation he went through last offseason, really trimming some of the fat. And a guy like Tyler Onyedem coming in and being impactful, and DJ Hicks taking that next step. And you're also pretty light on the outside of that defensive line. I think we're going to have a great pass rush when you're rushing for with A&M this year. I think you have so many exciting edge rushers. But from setting that edge perspective, from just holding your own on the interior, I think that's also going to play a role in, determining where this linebacker group goes. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm very curious on the defensive line, like you're saying. I think there's a lot of guys that you can like. I think, cutting down and getting skinny, athletic, speedy pass rushers on the edge is something I've been asking for a long time. That's always been, the boat that I've been on. I like the guys skinnier, and
we were kind of bulky out there last year, a couple 280 pounders.
Yeah, and that's how it's always fun, I feel like. I mean, it always feels like, if we have one really skinny guy, we got a pretty big dude on the other end. And this year, I think, you're looking at it coming into the season. I think your top 3 DNs are probably Howell, Searcy, and Kennedy, unless I'm missing somebody. But you also have the versatility from a guy like Tyler Onyedem. I honestly haven't done much.
I think you're doing good enough. You're good.
We're there.
Yeah, we're there.
But that's a guy that I think can play inside. But I think, in those scenarios where you probably want to get a little heavier, he can move out to the strong side defensive end position and be very impactful.
Did it at Iowa State. Absolutely.
Yeah. And he's a guy that I'm very intrigued in, but I also think, kind of looking at that defensive tackle room, I think Albert Regis, like you said, I think he'll take another jump. DJ Hicks has the talent to take as big a jump as anybody has in this room.
Swing this team. Yeah.
He is a ridiculous athlete. Ridiculous athlete. But at times last year, I think he was just trying to do too much or still finding his place among the big
processing
boys.
A lot. Yeah.
And I think Dayon Hayes is another guy I'm looking at from Colorado. But I think the one thing with the defense that I'm very curious about, last year, the team, you can say what you want about the defensive line. They did it really well. When the moment is the biggest and you really need to put pressure on a quarterback, whether that's because it's a huge moment, or it's a mentally weak quarterback who makes bad decisions under pressure. You saw it a lot in the LSU game with Nuss. Can Texas A&M put the pressure on a quarterback in those big moments? And building on that, can the secondary hold up a little longer if it takes a little long? If they're not able to get to the quarterback right away, is the secondary able to hold up for that much longer? I think last year that unit did really well along the defensive line at creating pressure when they needed to. That's the one thing I'm curious about, because I think that's one thing that made that defense so impactful early in the season, is that when it came down to it, they were able to bring pressure. They were able to make it hard for that quarterback. You know, we haven't seen enough from this unit yet to say whether or not they will be able to, but I think they can. And having 2 speed rushers off the edge certainly can help that, but that's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the back 7 kind of helping that front 4 out with the pass rush. If you look at some of the PFF numbers for A&M last year, many of the quarterbacks that A&M faced last year had well above average times to throw against A&M, and that to me leans on, first of all, schematics and playing around that defensive line, but also the secondary just giving up too much daylight, and they have to help this defensive line out. That's part of the pass rush, is just being able to hold a split second longer, not let the quarterback release. Riley Leonard had an insanely quick time to pass against A&M, and that's why we were all scratching our heads like, where was the pressure? Well, Riley Leonard's getting the ball out in a split second every single time. So, and that goes on the linebackers too. They're going to have to be great in coverage. The secondary's going to have to stop giving up those busts and stop allowing separation. But as a whole, talking about this linebacker group, talking about the secondary, getting so many guys back in this year too, that has to count for something, man. That has to help. And if you look at Elko's defenses year on year, everywhere he's been, it's been year on year improvement, no matter what. It's always better than the year before in pretty much every metric you can look at. And we're really, really banking on that in a year too. Well, all right, Jaxson, that covers our linebacker preview video. Tell the people one more time where they can find you, man. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, as always, I love being here, man. This is always so fun, but I'm always on all the socials. Anywhere you can find content, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, TikTok, anywhere you find anything, I'm on there.
Awesome, man. Y'all go follow AggieToday. And guess what? We're going to have him back a couple times on the season. This was too much fun. Y'all been asking for him. We'll keep it going. But all right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Gig 'em.
There you go.